Ho, ho, ho. Well, welcome to part two of my review of Duke Genesis. I was so rudely just cut off moments ago by my own Android. I guess too much data, or, it just puked and went off. But now a lot of you out there are like, Clark the Shark ought to hate this album, Duke, by Genesis. 1980, 81, I think, or 80. But of course, this album, it's like the three-piece Genesis of And Then There Were Three debut was interesting. They were attempting to go commercial with that album. But as I was saying in part one and other videos, here, Genesis do something, well, maybe I didn't say this yet. Genesis here go very prog and very commercial on one album, on the same album. And this is a totally different album from And Then There Were Three from 1978. It is nothing like that album. And of course, it is nothing like Wind and Wuthering from 1976, 4 years before. This album, I remember being a kid, 15, 16, and hearing this, and I was just confused because, like, what the hell is this? This isn't Genesis. I was just like, there really wasn't a Phil Collins solo thing yet. Maybe there was one album. I don't know. But I was like, has Phil gone solo here? Because, I was just very confused. And then, of course, people on the street would talk and say, no, Duke is not Phil solo. That's a Genesis album. And I was like, weird. And I kind of did hate this album at first. But of course, out of curiosity mainly, probably around 1985 or 86, I bought a scratchy copy of this at the Rhodium in Torrance. I know it wasn't Go Boy Records. I may have bought a copy of this at Go Boy, but for sure I remember buying this at the Rhodium. And it was in pretty poor quality, but I played it and I thought it's an interesting album, the way it starts out. And, I gave it a chance. I wanted to hate this, but I couldn't. Of course, now it contains about 3 commercial Genesis songs, basically Phil Collins solo songs, but not really. This is too early for that. I think the Phil Face Value album came out after this. I'm pretty sure. That might be from 1981. But this album, Duke, as I was saying in part one, an interesting album. And, the stuff where it does go commercial is unfortunate, but we didn't know at the time what commercial in Genesis really was. We'd heard Follow You, Follow Me from And Then There Were Three. But, we kind of accepted that. And certainly we accepted And Then There Were Three as a Genesis album. But this album was the time where all these new people were showing up at Genesis concerts, and a lot of ladies or girls showing up at the gigs, and things were changing quickly here. And me, Clark the Shark, I was less inclined to show up at a Genesis gig because me, I want to see the band with Bill Bruford and all that, like 1976, A Trick of the Tail. And that is not this, but this is still got something. There's some interesting things for sure here on this album, Duke by Genesis. Now, it's almost irrelevant what stars it gets, but there's some people giving it 5s and It's all over the place. It could be a 3, 4, or a 5. I could even see someone giving this a 2. But, I don't know, man. Me, Clark the Shark, I have to admit that Behind the Lines is killer. I mean, the way the album starts out, with just this long instrumental thing that builds into this thing with lyrics. It's like The Who, Tommy, but not at all. But it's sort of like that thing where you have this big, long instrumental piece, and then suddenly there's a guy singing. Very interesting. I really liked it. And it's really technical. I love the Tony Banks happy sounding keyboards. And this album is way different from And Then There Were Three. In a good way. I'm not so sure about in a great way, but it's definitely irks my interest. There's no doubt. Duchess, good song. I mean, I have to admit it. I mean, I want to hate it, but I don't. Banks, Collins, and Rutherford. Guide vocal, of course, very melodic, interesting. I like it. Genesis getting a little spiritual and like clever there. Guide vocal. Tony Banks song. And of course, Man of Our Times is probably my favorite song on the whole album, man. That's a fucking killer song. And I'm like, it's a Mike Rutherford song. But Phil's voice really shines on Man of Our Times. Good stuff. Now, Misunderstanding is where the controversy begins. I like the song, It's kind of got that Sly and the Family Stone little R&B groove. But it's very commercial, and we were very suspicious of the song. I remember back in the early 80s, like, what is this? But, I mean, come on. If Rush can go commercial, I guess so can Genesis, right? And it's a good, catchy songwriter song. Misunderstanding, basically a Phil pop song done through Genesis. Could have been Phil Collins solo. And Heathays is a song I like quite a bit. I like side 1, and I don't want to hate it. You out there would think Clark the Shark wants to hate this album, Duke, but I don't. I accept it. And of course, we didn't know at the time these guys were about to completely sell out. There's plenty of prog and interesting stuff on this album, especially side 1. Side 2 starts out with Turn It On Again, one of those really lame, horrible Phil Collins Genesis songs, but it's kind of good, man. I always find myself listening to Turn It On Again. And, once again, it's a song I want to hate, but I can't. I'm just like, what can I say, man? It's, interesting. Melodic, atmospheric, it's got it all, you guys. Turn It On Again. Is it a great song? No. But is it a really good, solid song? Yes. Is it a pop song for the radio? Absolutely. Is it a Phil Collins solo-like song? Sure. Come on, Turn It On Again. But, I accepted it, and I still accept it because no one knew at the time. We just thought, oh, this is look at Genesis, and look at Asia, with John Wetton. Look at Yes, 9012, whatever, where everyone was like, these bands making a comeback in the 80s, we didn't know, no one knew in 1980, 81, 82, 1979, that music was just about to fucking suck horribly. We were just like, groove along, man. Genesis, rock out. And Alone Tonight, I think Genesis were trying to write a hit here and failed miserably, horribly, but it's a good song. Alone Tonight, I like it. I find myself singing along. But Cul-de-sac, like Man of Our Times before it, is one of those great songs on the album. Killer melody by Banks. Man, killer keyboards on Cul-de-sac. And the lyrics are so great. It seems to be just this song about death that's so final and almost like, I don't know, I'm not an atheist. I'm a monotheist. I believe in God, but I also believe in Cul-de-sac. What a song. Good shit, man. Great stuff. I love Tony Banks keyboards. I love the paintings of the pastels and pastiche atmospheres. He's such a brilliant keyboardist. Sometimes he does a little too much and he goes overboard, but I still like it. And Please Don't Ask, another attempt at commercial that failed, but it's a nice song. Even though it's sappy, cheesy, Phil Collins, kind of mushy, I like it, man. I like this album, you guys. I hate to say that. Now, the album ends very prog with these instrumental, Duke's Travel, Duke's End. I love the ending of the album, and I love the beginning with Behind the Lines. They go and revisit the melodic theme of that. Dun, 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 dun. Kind of like the Tubes did on Remote Control and the Who do on Tommy and Quadrophenia. I love it when bands do, they go back and revisit a theme like a reprise. I love it. Or reprise, whatever. But the way this album ends, it's very prog. They're just kicking ass, man. Phil on drums and Tony with his keyboards and Rutherford, who's just awesome bassist, often playing fretless bass, sounds killer. And he's killer on guitar too. Of course, live, Daryl Stuermer's better. And Chester Thompson might be better than Phil when they play live. But as three guys overdubbing and just putting together albums, man, these three guys in Genesis just overdub, and they go in the studio and they know how to build songs from the bricks of a foundation. And love them or hate them, for better or for worse, take it or leave it, You end up liking Genesis. Now, the next album after this, Abacab, I'm not so sure about that. Sharkey definitely has reservations, certainly well justified, about Abacrap. But Duke, for sure, you guys. Even the hardcore proggy Genesis fans and fans of prog progressive music, they still accept and respect this album. Pop songs by Phil and all. These jamming keyboards, jamming drums, kick-ass song arrangements. Commercial yet progressive, kind of like And Then There Were Three, but no. This is different, you guys. This is Genesis Duke. 1980, when Clark the Shark was just 15 in Torrance, Redondo Beach. But I listened to this, and I heard plenty of this, maybe too much, on KLOS with Joe Benson and KMET with Jim Ladd and all those guys, back in the day. But me, Clark the Shark, I accept and I enjoy Duke by Genesis, 1980. Do I love this album? Am I crazy about it like a trick of the tail? No way. This does not have Steve Hackett. Is this like as good as The Lamb Lies Down with Peter Gabriel? Absolutely not. But it's okay, you guys. Right here on the Clark the Shark Show, 1-800-449-8255, from the fabulous golden EIB Sharkraphone. It's not a microphone, because you're hearing from the Wolfman Jack on crack, Clark the Shark, and you just got the only review of Genesis Duke, 1980. I always think of this as 1981, but it's not. 2 years after And Then There Were Three, an album I really like. I'm Clark the Shark, and you just got the word, the testimony, the gospel, the truth about Genesis Duke. And I'm out of here, people. Peace.